Welcome informally to the beginning of Admitted Students Weekend. Thank you for coming. My name is Joseph Lindsay. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the Director of Admissions and Operations at the law school. Today's session, we are going to talk about financial aid. No, I'm just kidding. We're talking about pro bono, and I appreciate our students that are here today to ask. And we have a few questions that they'll answer for us, but then leave more time for you all to ask questions that you might have. So without ado, I will have each of them introduce themselves, the year they're in school, what organizations they're participating in, including the pro bono or any others that they'd like to add. And so I'll start with Sarah on the far end.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarah O'Farrell. I'm a 2L here, which means I'm in my second year. I don't know how much you guys know about all that yet. I use she, her pronouns, and last year I was in the Survivor Advocacy Project, and this year I lead it, and then I do other things out on campus. I'm in a journal, and I'm in moot court.
Hi everyone, welcome to Berkeley. My name is Lorena Ortega Guerrero. I use she, her, hers. I'm also a 2L, and I have been a participant in the Post-Conviction Advocacy Project for the last 2 years, representing a client. I participated in the Berkeley Immigration Group last year, and this year I'm a co-leader. And then I am co-leading the last Berkeley Law Alternative Spring Break trip to Atlanta this year, which I went on when Ariane led it last year. And yeah, I do. I'm in the International Human Rights Clinic and some journals and moot court and such.
Hi everyone, welcome to Berkeley. My name is Ariane. I'm a 3L. I use she, her pronouns. 3L means that this is my last semester, and I've loved my time in Berkeley, and I've done a lot of pro bono work, and I'm excited to talk about it today. During my first year, I founded the Family Defense Project, which I'm wearing the gear right now. I also volunteered and led the Youth Advocacy Project, and volunteered and led the Blast trip, and we both went on the Atlanta trip and was really awesome. And then I've done a field placement or clinic every semester, so happy to talk about that to anyone who's interested. And I'm currently the editor-in-chief for one of the journals at the law school.
Okay, so I'll ask Sarah for the question then. There were some terms that were thrown around related to slips or blast as well. Can you briefly describe some of the different types? Feel free to, any of you as well, related to that were mentioned, like the field placements, because some of it is also falling under experiential education, but please, if you don't mind, related to pro bono projects.
Yeah, so SLIPs stands for Student-Initiated Legal Service Projects. We just refer to them as SLIPs. I think there are 40 here at Berkeley right now, with the option, like Ariane did, of establishing another one if there's a kind of a gap that you see. But essentially they really range in a variety of topics as well as the actual work you'll be doing. Some of them are client facing, some of them are more research, some of them are more community organizing. And then they range, yeah, like I said, in a variety of topics. So there are environmental ones, reproductive justice ones, immigration groups. They really kind of run the whole gamut of options. And this is all on the Berkeley Law Pro Bono program page. They have all of them there, and you can read descriptions of all the projects. But I have no hard statistics to say this, but I would say the vast majority of people at Berkeley are involved in a SLIP at some point. I think our year, like 90% of people did a SLIP, and they're really, really fascinating to work with. It's really like a unique chance to actually do legal work starting in your very first semester. You're working with attorneys. There's always like at least a supervising attorney, and then you're working with 2Ls and 3Ls who lead the project and actually doing relevant legal work that's, they're not lawyers posing questions to, check if you understand, but they're real questions they have. They don't know how to do it. They don't have the capacity to do it, and you're actually helping. So those are really fascinating to do. There are also blast trips, which are the Berkeley Law Alternative Service trips. They both went on them and I did not. So if you have any specific questions, I would defer to them. But just generally, there are 7 trips right now, which I believe were all founded by Berkeley students who either are from or have significant connections to the region that you go to. And so there are trips to Alaska, Hawaii, Atlanta, Kentucky, the Central Valley. I'm missing some other ones. Arizona, and the U.S.-Mexico border. And so you would go and you do legal service work for the clients in those areas. And the way that blasts work are you do some work kind of during the semesters leading up, and then on your spring break, that is a full-time kind of work. You travel, Berkeley pays for it. You travel on the weekend, you get there, and the whole time that you're there, you're doing kind of like 9 to 5 job work. Or 8 to 5, whatever works for that organization. And then there are Connect projects, which stands for, and I just learned this today, Call for Necessary Engagement in Community and Timely Response. So we just call them Connect projects. Essentially, Deborah, who is the fantastic pro bono director, sends out kind of blast emails on the listserv that you can sign up for, saying like, this community organization reached out and they need help with this legal need. If it's interesting to you, you can reply back and say, I'm interested, I'd like to apply. Usually you send like a little paragraph to Deborah and the organization telling them why you're interested and what you want to do. And in the email that she sends out, it would specify what you'd be doing. And those can, again, range a lot. Sometimes they're like kind of like one day they need people to staff phone calls and be like intaking client needs, or sometimes they're more long-term research projects. So those, again, vary a lot. And then the last category is independent projects, which I know the least about, but I talked to Deborah this morning about them. And essentially there are 2 ways to do them. Either you as a student can go out and find an organization that you really want to work for and see, kind of like set up the project yourself, and then come back and get that checked with Deborah of like, here is a project I want to do that's pro bono. There's a pro bono definition that it has to meet. Or you can go to Deborah and say, I'd really like to do an independent project, and there's a list of organizations that we typically partner with, and she can help match if you're interested, like I'm interested in doing this work and this type of thing, and she can help try to figure out where you can best be placed. And the independent projects, as the name implies, are much more independent from Berkeley. It might be you, or maybe you and one other student kind of working with that organization more directly.
Anything you want to add?
Maybe I'll add one thing to the independent projects, but I think Sarah did a fantastic job explaining everything. But one way students, I think, often do independent projects are after your 1L summer or 2L summer. If you were working with a public interest organization and one of your projects is still continuing and you'd like to stay on, then you could actually just work for a few hours a week here and there to support that project if they need to, and you could get pro bono for that. And so I did that after my first summer, and that was pretty cool.
So as you could tell, there's like nearly 40 SLIPS projects, and they keep evolving over time, but they range in different ways from direct client work to more research-based work. So can you talk more about the exact work you've done through your projects and how you might categorize them? What kind of skills are you learning through these projects as well, Lorena?
Yeah, one of the amazing things about the array of projects is you can really target yourself not just in thematically, like the issues that you care about and you want to work on, but also through what angle you want to work on them, like whether that be research or direct representation, advocacy. Like there really is such an array. My background is in direct representation, so coming to law school, I was really intentional about wanting to find a way to maintain that while I was doing this. As you'll probably come to find, law school and law classrooms can be very removed. You're learning about doctrine, you're learning about ideas in the macro, and so SLIPS provide such a wonderful opportunity to ground everything that you're learning and like the intimate ways that it shapes and impacts people's lives. And so, sorry, that was kind of a tangent, but I've been doing direct representation with the Post-Conviction Advocacy Project. I, myself, and a team of 2 other individuals have a client we've been working with for the last 2 years to prepare her, an incarcerated client, to prepare her for her parole board hearing. And so that's been very direct representation work, monthly visits, preparing declarations, gathering facts, mooting hearings, and working very intimately with a local organization that does this work. And then with the Berkeley Immigration Group, last year I worked on release requests to petition for individuals to get released from detention. So a lot of the similar work, declarations, fact gathering. And I think what I love about both of these projects is I'm working with the client, one-on-one. Like it's kind of overwhelming for you to be a 1L and to say like, I have a client. I'm like, who let me do this? This is crazy. But has also just been completely invaluable. Like I've learned how to be a lawyer from them just as much as I have in the classroom, is my belief. But yeah, I think it can really vary. And like now being a leader of a SLIP, I get to kind of see that play out. With the Berkeley Immigration Group, we have 3 different projects that include direct representation, but then we also have people working with ACLU NorCal doing like advocacy work. We have them working with another group doing research. So it can really vary, and just really just awesome. And I think the fact that this is student led, you can see that in like in not just the intentionality with the work, but also like, you know, students are, if you are seeking some kind of experience, you will find it. And if you can't find it, you'll make it. And Deborah will, and the pro bono team will encourage you, because that's their goal.
Any of you like to add anything, or are you good? So in reading some of the applications, well, quite a bit of the applications, there's been a lot of talk about people wanting to participate in SLIPs, but there are a few that actually are talking about starting a SLIP, which you did. Some of the newer recent ones, of course, are like DCRIM, Queer Justice Project. We also have the Family Defense Project as well. So can you walk us through that process as well? How, you know, you went through that process, working with Deb and creating it, and also then how do you retain it to keep it going, moving forward?
Great question. First, I gotta say there's, you know, if you notice a gap in the community and you want to do something about it, there are actually many ways to do it. One way to do it is creating a SLIP. Another way is to do an independent pro bono project. Other ways, I know Sarah and Lorena, both in their own SLIPs, you know, either created a branch, like a new branch of a project, or like made sure that the vision aligned with their own values. And I think that those are, because it's student-led, it's really led by students, and you can really lead the vision and the direction of the project, which I think is really cool. And so I started a family defense project with my 2 friends, Greta and Justine, because just like, I think January of 1L, we were talking about the child welfare system and how messed up it is. And the 3 of us were working with children and just so frustrated at seeing the system again and again, removing children from their parents and separating families based on poverty-related neglect. So, you know, housing instability, no food, like dirty clothes, like just purely poverty reasons that, you know, could be solved with a bit more financial support, and instead we just destroy families. So we noticed that in the East Bay, there's no support for parents whatsoever at all. It's like a panel system, it's really bad. Anyways, and so we decided that maybe we should, and the school also didn't have anything about supporting parents, any classes about, you know, parent representation, family defense. There was like one family law class, and now that family law class is better, but anyways, there's nothing. So we said, well, maybe we could do something. And very quickly we said, let's do it. And so that was like early in our spring semester of 1L, so quite early in the law school journey. And we met with Deborah Schlossberg, who maybe you've met already, who's the head of the pro bono program, thank you. And she was very supportive from the get-go, and she kind of just like walked us through the steps. And so there's a bunch of administrative stuff you got to do, but if you're 2 or 3 people, like it's completely fine to do. But then the most important is that the pro bono program wants to know if the project is viable, right? So they actually want you to come up with a project, find community partners, and then do the work yourself for at least a semester. So we were connected to some community partners that we love, and now they're all my mentors, and I feel very connected to the East Bay because of this project. And they kind of helped us figure out what tasks or what projects students could work on. What, you know, we're all like, most students who do SLIPs are 1Ls, so like come with really no legal knowledge. So what can 1Ls do that would be helpful for the community and also give them new skills? So we kind of workshop that. And then we really wanted the SLIP to start in the fall of our 2L year, which meant that we had to do the work during the summer. So during my 1L summer, like I had my my internship, and then on the side I would also do the pro bono work of the Family Defense Project to make sure that it was viable, interesting work, and helpful. And then we were able to get that kind of confirmed, and we started getting applications in our 2L fall of incoming 1Ls. And that from then on, we had like a bunch of applicants, and just was so amazing to see the interest. And many people said, whoa, like I didn't even know family defense was a thing. Like we really saw that we raised awareness on an issue that no one really knew about, or that's really not talked enough about. Like, I feel like now there's been a bit more talk about the harms of the CPS and the child welfare system that we call the family policing system, and I'm happy to talk about this with anyone. But anyways, I think with the SLIP, we really raised awareness in the community and in the law school, and it's been really awesome to see that. And now for the question of sustainability, that's always been an issue for us, because we only have 3 years here, right? Like, we're all very transient, and like anything you start might die, and we really didn't want that. So it was very hard, but as 3Ls, we decided to just pass the baton to incoming 2Ls to make sure that they could lead the project and that it would be sustainable even when we graduate. And at first it was kind of hard because we had our vision and they had mostly the same vision, but we couldn't really direct them. Like, we were really hands off, and they've done a wonderful job. And at the same time, what we did was advocate at the school for a family defense clinic that would be way more sustainable, that would have way more funding, that would allow way more students to do the work, and that would allow to help way more parents. And we're very hopeful that maybe it's gonna happen for 2025 or 2026. So if any of you are interested in that, there might be this possibility, and I really encourage everyone to check it out. But yeah, anyways, when you start a project like that, I think it's very important to have people you like to like create the project with, because it's definitely intense, and have a vision and think about sustainability. But throughout all that time, you'll be supported by Deborah Schlossberg and everyone else at the school who really encourage students to start something where they see a need. Yeah.
So we'll open up for questions in a minute, but I also wanted to ask one other question that we've even heard yesterday, and hopefully I forgot to ask one piece of it when you introduce yourself of what you'll do after once you graduate. But over 90% of our students do participate in pro bono of some sort in their first year of law school. Dean Chemerinsky will announce what this current class is doing, so hopefully he'll tell you tomorrow as well. But in the same thing, though, fewer really want to go into public interest work. I don't know how many here are not thinking about that, but what would you say to a student then who maybe wants to go into big law? Who's not thinking about doing public interest work, and why should they still consider it? So I'll start with you first.
Well, I'm graduating in the spring, which is crazy, and I'm gonna do a clerkship, so that means working with a judge for 2 years, and after that, I'm hoping to get into impact litigation. I did not know what that was before starting law school, but that's basically civil rights work at the state or federal level, but not necessarily direct client work. So in public interest. But I still think there's a value for anyone just in general to do pro bono work, just because, as Lorena said, it kind of grounds you while you do law school, and it allows you to see the real impact of laws and policies and like your own privilege as a future lawyer. And I think it's very important to really keep that in mind, and also to remember that there's life outside of law school. And I think that's really helped me. And also in general, like when people do go to big law, there's often like a pro bono practice that you can do. And I know some big law firms, and I'm sure Sarah or Lorena might talk more about that, but some big law firms have bigger pro bono practices than others, and some big law firms also welcome new ideas for pro bono. And so even for the Family Defense Project, like there is a way that people doing big law could take on dependency cases and helping parents through the court system. So like you can still be intentional as to how you want to use your pro bono time during big law, and I think law school is a good time to explore kind of what you want to do and maybe gain the skills to later do that work while you're in big law.
Yeah, I'll just add, I'm a 2L, so who knows what will happen in a year, but I'm currently planning on doing impact litigation and immigration and immigrants' rights. So fingers crossed that happens. I think that there's a lot of reasons, and I may be wrong in this, and so correct me if this is false, but I'm just basing it off of what I remember from looking at other schools. Like, I remember finding it really incredible how early on you could get involved at Berkeley, not just like, journals, but also like slips, like 1 to 2 months into law school. You can choose not to, but like if you want to, you can be doing the work, and I think that in contrast to the way that 1L year happens in all schools, which is like you don't really get to pick your classes, you're taking doctrinals. I think it's really unique and incredible to be doing something connected to your why of you came. You know, you all wrote personal statements, like you all have reasons that you're here. I think that especially when you don't get to pick your classes per se, it can be really hard to remember that why. And I think slips provide an incredible opportunity, even if you maybe don't do that right after law school or do it as in a pro bono, you know, it's still a great way to kind of stay grounded in the issues that drive you. I found that really beneficial when I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die because I need to study contracts. But I think another thing is, and I kind of touched on this too, like practical skills. I think law school is a lot of figuring out what kind of lawyer you want to be. And I think that starts to happen really early on with just like, how do I think? Like, how do I think? Because I need to figure out how I learn so that I can do well in this class. And all of that is like you trying to figure out, like what kind of lawyer you are and what kind of lawyer you're going to be. And I think that slips are an incredible opportunity to start to put that into practice in the way that you engage with clients, in the way that you approach legal issues, in the way that you approach challenges or collaborate with colleagues. Slips are such an incredible opportunity to start putting those things into practice, especially if you're a KJD and maybe haven't had as much experience. Like, you know, when it comes to applying to jobs 1 all year, you have 1 to 2 activities that you can speak to where you've directly done the work. So that's something to keep in mind if you're a KJD. And I lost my train of thought, but my last plead is I'm from Oakland, California, so I'm from right here. And I think that was also a big reason that made me want to come to Berkeley. Was I was really impressed by how much Berkeley students seem to care about giving back to the community that they're residing in for 3 years. You know, law students are brilliant and capable and have something to offer even if they don't have a bar card yet. And so I've always deeply admired that students are interested in giving back to this community. And given that it is my community, I find that really incredible. So those are my plugs for why you should do pro bono.
Okay, I have a lot of thoughts, so I'll try to keep this structured and succinct, but bear with me. I'm also a 2L, so don't have definitive plans what I'm doing after law school, but I am this summer going to a big law firm, and typically the way it works, unless you really mess up, you sometimes are offered to go back, so that's maybe what I'll be doing. Don't know yet, so we'll see. Check back in with me after the summer. But 2 things I wanted to build off from Lorena's answer that I'm now forgetting. The first thing I wanted to build on was just when she said about practical skills. My slip is really focused on research and writing. And I remember someone once told me that research and writing is like an attorney's bread and butter. Like it's all what you do all day, every day. And there are obviously lots of client interactions and oral advocacy kind of sprinkled in, but like a lot of what you're doing is research and writing, and that depends obviously, but for the most part. And so something really big for me coming into law school was I really wanted to hone those skills. That was not something that legal writing, as you'll see, is a whole thing on its own. It's really unlike any other writing you do. And so getting the chance to really develop those skills was really important to me. And that's something that I think I really have gained from my slip. The other thing I wanted to build off from Lorena's answer was you mentioned kind of like connecting to your why. When I came in to law school, I had a lot of whys. I had a lot of things I was interested in. Like there were kind of a lot of paths I could go. And it was really hard for me to pick one thing because I think obviously lawyers are kind of generalists and you can do things, but you sort of have to kind of pick where you're going. And so I've picked environmental law. That's kind of like the path I want to go down. But my slip is fully focused on kind of like survivor advocacy. I realized I didn't even explain what it was, but we do like reproductive justice access, abortion protection rights. We do survivor work with incarcerated individuals who have been assaulted, so things like that. And that's another big passion of mine that I don't know if I'm going to get the opportunity to do in practice. So it was really important for me to kind of build some of those connections and learn about that in a slip. So I think it can be kind of a way to bolster down on something you really, really care about, but it can also be a way to explore something that, you are passionate about, but maybe won't be your day-to-day life as an attorney. So it can also be a way to try something new, or if there's something you're like, that's really interesting, I'd love to try it, can do that as well. And then circling back to the big answer that I was gonna give is the reason I chose the firm I'm going to is they have the biggest pro bono practice of all the law firms. Last time I checked, it was like ranked #1, and that was a huge thing for me because I am really passionate about pro bono. I've talked to a lot of partners who do tons of pro bono work and already have like some projects lined up that I'm like, I'm gonna join these because it's really impactful. So I think even if you do go into big law, there is a big way to make pro bono part of your practice. And I think especially for young associates going into big law, pro bono is usually where you're going to get a lot of your skills. Like most of the time, you're not going to be able to be the one arguing or taking depositions on these like huge cases with these really big clients, but like you usually can have much more influence on pro bono practices or pro bono cases. So I think it's also a way that like you might make more of a difference in that way. I'm saying way a lot. And then I think something else that you should take into account when you're thinking of big law, just to flag for you all, is that some firms allow you to bill for pro bono and some don't. So just if you are interested in big law, like to flag that if pro bono is something interesting to you, that like different firms treat them in different ways. And I think there are lots of opportunities to really make it a big part of who you are and what you want to do, but you kind of sometimes need to be strategic about those choices.
So we reserved most of this time then for questions that you might all have. And so feel free. If there's anyone here that might have a question that people know? Yes?
It seems like from your first year, you guys were engaged in a lot of different things. Would you say that it's generally possible to do a lot of different things while keeping up the workload, or are you guys sort of exceptions to this rule?
I'd say most people, I mean, I don't know if most people, but from my friend group, it seemed like most people were doing one journal and one slip in the fall of 1L. Like that seemed like a very usual thing to do. And then some people did 2 slips in a journal, or like 1 slip and 2 journals. Like there's a way to like kind of focus your interest, but I'd say it's the majority of people that do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll find in law school, you have to like figure out what works for you in every sense. And I think that's pro bono work is like similarly. I started my first semester, but like now as a leader, like I had a good amount of people joined second semester for that reason. Like they didn't know, what law school was going to look like. And so they were like, I want to, reserve this time to study. And then they figured it out and they were like, no, I can actually do this. So that is very much an option. You can engage whenever you want, and you can also engage to varying degrees. PCAP is, I think, one of the slips that is the most demanding, and they tell you that straight off the bat. But there are some slips where you maybe dedicate like 5 hours a semester. And I think at least I have found, maybe there's no such thing as overstudying, but like, I think that slips and balancing with other activities will help you be a little bit more intentional with your studying, and with, how you spend your time. I have never regretted the time that I spend on my slips. They have supplemented my studying in other ways that I think are really important. So I have never felt like I've never felt like it's been an impediment to my studying. But you become really good at time management in law school, if anything. And I think that it can be really overwhelming as a 1L first semester to be like, I can literally be involved in everything from day one, but you don't have to be. And I think that is really nice too. And you can kind of fold into it at the rate that you want to. But if you want to, day one, go for it. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add is that when you, like at the beginning of the year, there's like a pro bono fair and you get to like meet all the different slips, and they usually tell you like straight away how many hours it is per semester, so you know pretty early on how much you're joining. But then even within that, there's room to kind of scale up or scale down. I also think that slips are a really interesting way to actually kind of solidify and clarify what you're doing sometimes. It obviously depends on the classes and the work that you're doing, but like for instance, contracts is a very confusing topic for me, and my slip project my first year was involving kind of like some contract topics, and so it created a really interesting way for me to talk to my contracts professor and get clarity on things that I didn't even know I was confused about if I had just gone to lecture, because it was only when I really started engaging with them more directly that I was like, oh wait, I actually don't understand that concept. And so it kind of helped clarify, like in that way too. That is not always the case. I have just found that. And I just thought of something else that I now forgot. But it can definitely be it can be very manageable. I think, like we said, most people are involved in a slip or a blast or something in some way. And I think people find them to be really impactful in a way that's not just kind of pure doctrine that you're getting in your initial 1L classes, but kind of like Lorena said already, but like remembering why you're here and what you want to do with the skills you're learning.
Sorry, I just want to add one last thing, because kind of going to the choose your own adventure aspect of this, like blasts, we haven't talked about them a ton, but like, you know, a lot of students choose to, instead of commit to a slip all year, they commit to a blast. And like blasts don't really require a lot of time and work in like during the whole school year. It's mostly that intensive of a week. And you know, you're doing like 40 hours. So you could be doing more than, you know, you would do in a slip throughout the year. It's just intensive. And you'll see that like students will pick that if they're like, I don't know if I can do this the whole time, but like I would love to spend a week doing this, you know, spending a whole week dedicating my time to this. And they are incredible. We haven't talked about them a lot, but they are such incredible trips. You know, just a great opportunity to spend time with amazing students and friends, but also to get to work within organization intensely. We both worked with KIND, which is Kids in Need of Defense in Atlanta, Georgia. We represented unaccompanied minors in their immigration petitions. And again, for 1 week, we had clients, like we worked intensely with these kids. And again, they run the gamut and the issues that they touch on. And I think the pro bono team has been pretty intentional about making our blasts, you know, have an array of different kinds of work and issues that you can get involved in. So if that's a concern, blasts are an incredible opportunity for that.
Sorry, I remembered my last thought, and this is on a very practical note that I just think, like we mentioned earlier, slips and blasts are really unique things that Berkeley allows 1Ls to get involved with that some other schools don't. And because of that, they can be really interesting points to put on your resume when you're applying for jobs. Like they were something that came up a lot for me when I was applying to jobs, talking about like, here's actual legal experience that I've done. So that's just a practical note of why slips and blasts are useful.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, and it was actually talking about the blast, so perfect. I was just wondering, like, if you could go a little bit more in depth about the kind of work that you were doing when you were in Georgia.
Georgia? Did you say Jordan?
Like, yeah.
Sorry.
Georgia.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think they vary. We specifically did direct representation. So Atlanta is works with an organization called AVLF that does restraining orders, like helps victims of domestic violence apply for restraining orders, get their restraining orders like that same day. All of the process happens in one day. And then the other half of the group works with KIND, working with a unaccompanied minor on like preparing their petition for special immigrant juvenile visas. Declarations, filling out the forms, all the sorts. And I think that most blasts kind of do direct representation-esque work, again, varying in issues. But although you're not doing like a ton of work throughout the year, your blast leaders are in like helping facilitate and working with the host organizations so that when you do show up Monday at 8 a.m., like you start running, you know, you can like, you don't spend 3 days onboarding and like learning the laws. Like you show up the first day and you're like ready to see your client and ready to do the work.
And, sorry, can I just add so we both did Atlanta, the Blast Atlanta, so I think we can mostly only talk about that, but I think one of the other blasts that's different from direct work is Blast Mississippi, and it's my understanding that they go for a week to Mississippi and do field work to try to get a sense of how, for example, I think 2 years ago there was a new bail law, and they went to Mississippi and traveled around the state to see how that bail law was being implemented. And that field work was kind of requested by the public defender's office in Mississippi because they wanted to know, okay, how does it actually work, and is it being respected? And then so they did that research for a week, talking to judges, talking to defenders, talking to community organizers, and then during the rest of the semester they worked on a document that would summarize their findings and then send it to the public defender's office there. And I thought that was a unique way of using that time, but also very helpful.
Yes.
I was reading about a public interest summer grant.
Edley grants. Forgot to bring.
Yeah. I think it maybe from nodding, it looks like we all applied for the EDLI grant. Yeah. So the EDLI grant is if you get 25 hours during your 1L year, you qualify for the grant. It's a super easy form to fill out. I would say most people I know that did public interest work over the summer or were interested in it were able to hit the 25 mark. You can kind of talk, and you can, when you're choosing your slips or blasts, you can kind of tailor again. If you know you want to do that, you can pick a project that might have a few more hours every week to guarantee that you're going to get that done. I had no problem hitting it. I went far over. And then the form was pretty easy. And then it helps guarantee funding for a public interest type work over the summer, which is what we all did last summer. Nope, 2 years ago. 1L summer.
And Deborah Schlossberg will be on your, month before, she'll be reminding you of the deadline, and she'll be saying, if you're worried about not hitting the 25 hours, come to me, and she'll connect you with people and with organizations to make sure you hit the 25 if that's what you want. So I haven't heard of anyone who hasn't been able to get it that wanted it. It's April 4th. Yeah, so you've got time.
Did you have a question?
And there's a way, I can't remember exactly how it was because it was one of my friends, but there's a way where if you hit April and you haven't hit your hours yet, but you're going to still by the end of the year, there's a way to say I'll get X amount more hours. So there's a little bit of flexibility within the system.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to know what the process was for applying or stating interest in joining the SLIPS or the BLAST program at this point.
I can speak to that briefly. So first semester is a whirlwind, but you are probably introduced to slips and blasts maybe the week after you start. And we pushed back the application cycle this past year, so now I think it's 2 weeks after that. It's all centralized, which is really incredible. The pro bono office does an amazing job of facilitating all of this. They really are here to make us make all of the work that we do sustainable. So it's a centralized application process. Everybody applies at the same time. There are slip specific questions that are usually trying to gauge, past experience, interests, motivation, language skills, if those are necessary. But it's all one centralized application that then gets sent to all of the slip leaders. And I think you hear back about a week or two after that. I think that it'll vary amongst, between the slips. I think it'll also vary depending on what that slip needs at the time, we needed a lot of Spanish speakers that year. And so that was a bit of an impediment that we faced and something that we had to filter for. But I think generally, as Sarah was saying, we would love for you to do this work. And if you are applying, amazing. That means that you want to do this. And so even if you feel you don't have experience with a particular kind of work that a slip is doing, but you just convey that you're interested and willing to learn and want to dedicate your free time to this work, chances are high. This is not an incredibly selective process just for the sake of being selective. We want students to be involved in slips. We want students to be excited about, dedicating their time to supporting and helping people through our very difficult and convoluted legal systems and processes. And so if you maybe don't get your first slip that you wanted, because you do rank them. Wow, I'm terrible at explaining this. You do rank them. And so if you don't get your first one, maybe you get your second one, maybe you get your third. And again, this is another place where Deborah comes in and is oh, you didn't get any of them? I'm gonna get you one. Let's work on this. How do we get you to do the work that you wanna do? But I think, yeah, it feels a little overwhelming just because it's at the beginning of the school year, but it is a very streamlined process. You hear about them, you hear from all of them at the same time, and you will do a slip if you want to do a slip.
Yeah, and the only thing that I'll add is just that different slips have different requirements in terms of semester or year-long commitments. So there is also, and a lot of them that are semester-long allow for spring recruitment. I don't know if that's the word that you use anyways. So it's possible that you could do more than one slip. Say if fall semester comes around, you apply, I think you can rank 5, say you don't get your top choice, but they also have people that they can accept in the spring, you could try again. And people are pretty flexible about doing that.
So we have time for one more question or maybe two possibly. Yes.
No. I'm sorry. Yeah. It has to start while you're in law school, and you need to have like a legal supervisor, like a lawyer who's supervising you, and like it needs to count there. Yeah, they're kind of strict about that. I'm sorry.
Could you still, I guess, count it towards, if you had started it previously, could you continue on?
Yes, absolutely. Like I'd say, like if there's a project you have in mind, talk to Deborah. Say this is what I want to do, like on my own time, and then you kind of talk with her to see if it qualifies, and if it doesn't, how can you make it qualify? And then from then on, you can just start accruing your hours for sure.
Anyone have one last question to ask? Yes.
I was just curious what kind of support exists, especially creating a new slip. If you ever feel like you're in over your head, or you want to make sure you're giving like appropriate advice, yeah, what does that support look like?
So that you give appropriate advice to clients. So you're always working with a lawyer, always supervised. That's like one of the requirements for pro bono is having a legal supervisor. So whenever I was working with client, it was like under the direction and the guidance of a lawyer. So I was never on my own, and that's why I was saying like I've become very close to my supervisors, mentors through that work, because it becomes very close knit kind of work. So always guided.
Yeah, and then just like also because slips are usually kind of passed down from leaders, you can always refer, if you're a leader or someone in the slip, there's always like, you can talk to your leaders or you can talk to past leaders, as well as just, I feel like we've talked about the pro bono program, but they're truly so fantastic. Like Deborah, Natch, and Leslie are amazing. You can always schedule meetings with them, and they can have probably seen whatever problem that you have before and can give really, really good advice. So I think it can feel very easy as a law student to feel overwhelmed. I often have that feeling, but they're really great sources of advice and guidance, or if you just need to kind of decompress and tell someone what's going on, they're really great for that.
Did you have one last one?
Yeah, could you talk about how the work within your slip gets assigned to you? Because it sounds like in some of them, the work can be fairly varied. So if you could explain that a little bit, I'd appreciate it.
In my slip, we have 2 projects. So we work with 2 different kind of organizations. And the way that it works is when we're accepting applications in the fall, we ask people to indicate which one they might be more interested in, or if they have interest in both. And then as we're picking people to fill in, we kind of try to allocate people based on the preference they have, or if they don't have a preference, kind of slot them in where need be. I don't know if every slip does that, and it might depend on, like, for instance, like Lorena said, if there's like language requirements that might kind of limit you into a certain category, but I think there's a fair amount of choice that's involved with a lot of slips. People want you to do things that you're interested in, and we don't want to force you to do something that you are maybe not as passionate about.
Yeah, I think it depends. I mean, there's like 40, and like they're really student led. Like we designed that, like they're, it really, I think it also varies like year by year what the leaders choose to do that year, and like the projects that they're working with. But I think, for example, like PCAP, the post-conviction advocacy one, I got assigned to a team and a client from the beginning, and that's been the client I've had for the last 2 years. Whereas like Big, we have 3 projects similar to the model that Sarah was explaining, and they vary in the type of work. And similarly, we asked what kind of work are you interested in, looked at requirements, and then slotted people into projects or to 2 projects. So I think it can vary depending on the type of work that you're doing. But that is like we have like a fair, like we have events, like you're not applying without knowing like the kind of work that you would be doing, and without the leaders knowing what you're interested in doing. So it is very collaborative in trying to figure out like the best way for you to plug into the work that we're doing.
Nothing much to ask. I feel like all my slips were a mix of those 2 options. And yeah, student-led, like if there's something you really want to do and you don't want to do anything else, like there's a way to talk. But usually people are like just working in cooperation, and like often students just want to jump in where there's a need, and that's kind of how it works.
So I want to thank you all for agreeing to do this today for us. We really appreciate it.